Hey, Kevin Inoue here again from Fight Designer LLC with another PewTube episode. I put a quick thing out there this afternoon to see what folks were interested in, and one of the topics that came up, this was on the Facebook page for the Theatrical Firearms Handbook, which published in 2014. One of the things that came up was a little bit more on gun wrangling. So I thought one of the things that I'd talk about today is something that gets a little shortchanged sometimes when we run out of time. But it's really one of the questions we always have to answer for our actors and for our design team as a part of the conversation when using prop firearms is, what do I do when it screws up? At some point over the course of the run of a show or working on a movie, you're gonna have a time when something goes wrong. Just shit happens. It comes with the territory. These are mechanical devices. They are prone to failure. Unless you're just using solid rubber, something's going to go wrong at some point. And the more complex the mechanism, the more it depends on the load to cycle the action, the more it's going to jam. So let's take a quick look at some of the possibilities and some of our options that we can give our actors as well as our sort of full design team. If you have something that is designed to go bang, right? One of our options for that would be a blank firing gun. I should have taken the tag off this. Oh well. So let's say we're using a blank firing revolver. This is actually a completely brand new Umarex Chief Special. I have a number of extras of these because I ordered them when I heard that Umarex was going to stop importing blank guns, Umarex USA. So I have some extras if anybody's wanting one. These are the 38 top vent. They have a little hole up top here. So the beauty of revolvers is that it does not rely on the load to be able to cycle the action. So if you are using a blank firing gun and it doesn't go bang when you expect it to, it could be a couple of things. It could be that you just got a dud round. It could be that there's something wrong with the timing, especially if you're using a crappy like Kemar or Bruni. It could be that there's a hang fire, which we'll get back to later. That's one of the more dangerous options. Or it could be that you didn't load all of the cylinders. In this case, it's 5, sometimes it's 6. And some gun wranglers will like to only load as many shots as you actually need, or maybe one extra, or they'll like to leave an empty one under the hammer so that if it gets bonked hard enough and dropped on that, it's not going to go off. I totally get that. Some models that works great, some it doesn't because it doesn't lock up when the hammer's not back. I'm thinking of the single action Bruni, I think it is, that does that, that free spins. Anyway, for some reason, it just goes click when it's supposed to go boom. With a revolver, you can just go on to the next shot. And of course, if it's a single action, double action modern revolver, you have the option of either just pulling the trigger or cocking the hammer first, and then it's a much lighter trigger pull. Watch what happens to that trigger there. Yeah, the work's almost all done for you with the hammer there. And you can try again, and you can just keep trying until you hit a live round. If it's a question of, you know, maybe they thought it rotated the other way and so they loaded them on the wrong side, or they forgot to add the fact that when you first shoot it, it's not the one in front of the hammer now, it's the next one in line, because when it's cocked or it gets cocked as you pull the trigger, it's going to rotate. Some of these rotate clockwise, some rotate counterclockwise, and if they didn't properly accommodate for the exact model they were using when they were loading it, you know, this is certainly an option we can give somebody who is using a revolver. If it doesn't go boom, first thing you do, try again. See if it succeeds the second time around. Certainly an option. Keep it pointed in a safe direction. If it is a hang fire, the last thing we want to do is, well, with a top vent, something like this, where it would actually vent right into our faces if it went off. Every now and then you do get a hang fire, which is where instead of going boom right away, the primer kind of fizzles a little bit before it catches the main powder charge. And so it can conceivably go off later, like up to 30 seconds later, potentially. So you just want to make sure that over that time it is pointed in a safe direction. Now with most of these, if it goes off and you've moved on to the next round, it's just going to be going off here. It's still not a huge safety issue. There's a blockage there. It'll certainly surprise you, but it's not going to be a huge safety issue. Now there was one incident, I believe on the stage in London a few years back, where somebody was using one of the kind of higher-end Civil War blank firing models like you can get from Western Stage props, and these are like $350 props. But as I understand it, one of them actually has an open feeding, there's no gate to chamber around on the right-hand side. So what presumably happened, and a lot of this was speculation because there was a lawsuit involved and they can't talk about it then, is that there was a hang fire, and when it did go off, it had rotated clockwise and ended up lining up with the loading gate, which was just an open space in that one, or else it went right through the loading gate. and then went off, launching the shell casing back into the actor's face, and possibly causing them some loss of vision in one eye and some scarring to the face. So the important part there is, if you think that there is any chance that it might be a hang fire, keep it pointed in a safe direction, keep it all safe. If there is an open space lining up with that, I would just cheat it a little bit off to the side, so that if it does do something, it's going off that way and not right into my face. But keep wherever the vent is aimed in a safe direction, at least for 30 seconds or so. So even if you do move on to the next round and it successfully works, and then maybe you gotta lie dead and you get shot, keep it pointed in a safe direction. And when it's all done, dunk that round in a thing of water backstage and throw it out later. Because you just don't want to mess with that. Although you can look also and do some diagnostic testing to see, did the primer get hit in the middle? Does it seem like it was a light primer strike? Was it off center? You can try and figure out what went wrong later after the fact. But in the middle of the show, you need to know, what the heck do I do? Because the story says that shot's got to happen, that guy's got to die. What do I do? If it doesn't matter, because you're supposed to do 3 shots and it doesn't really change the story if you only get 2 off, yeah, maybe you just do 2, and that's okay. But sometimes even that doesn't work. Sometimes you don't have more rounds to go to, or sometimes it's more complicated. So, other options. We might have a sound cue as our backup, so that if it just goes click, click, and everybody can figure out what's happening, maybe we have some sort of a cue to the sound op who's got an extra optional cue loaded, so that then when I bring it down here and pretend to fidget with it, they load up their sound cue, and when I raise it back out, then they push their little button on the soundboard and we get a boom from the soundboard that is just a pre-recorded sound cue. That's one option. If it is a not so serious dramatic play, especially if it's a comedy and people are okay with that, maybe you just yell, bang, and they fall over dead. Everybody gets a good laugh out of it, nobody's hurt, it stays safe. What we don't want is a situation where the actor panics and has to ad-lib, and they just decide to beat the person with it or throw it, or I don't know. We don't want people to have to ad-lib under pressure with weapons. That's a bad idea. But, maybe that is the option. Maybe if it doesn't work, you toss it onto the couch, you go over and you choke him to death because he's got to die or the story doesn't make sense. But have a plan B. Another option, maybe there's a second blank gun that a stagehand has backstage. And so instead of a sound cue, if you really want something that is more like a blank going off, same kind of thing, you have a way to cue them, maybe just to peek off into the wings, make sure they're ready, and then as it goes up, they do the sound backstage, and you just kind of mime it like you're lip syncing for the gun there. But one way or another, we need some kind of a backup plan. Those are kind of our 2 biggest ones. Either just the person yells bang, you try and deal with it yourself, 3 biggest ones. Or it's a sound cue or a blank gun backstage. Now, depending on the actor, you may or may not trust them to fidget with stuff, including even going on to the next shot. Sometimes even that's asking a bit much, so, depends. It depends on the show. The production of Gloria that's just closing this weekend, they had a gas blowback that was mic'd. One of the things I talked about is, well, if we're already running that lavalier mic next to their wrist through enough sound effects, maybe they can just tap that with their offhand and that'll get enough of a booming sound that's within the same sound design as the rest of the show. I don't know. There's lots of potential options out there. Now, if you are using a semi-automatic, it becomes a little more complicated. If you're using a semi-automatic blank gun, there's just more things that can go wrong, or any kind of semi-automatic. One possibility is that the safety got turned on. Safety is in general, if there's a little red dot, it means the safety is off. If there's not a red dot, it means this... if there's a red dot, yeah. If there's a red dot, it can fire. If there's not a red dot visible, there's a decent chance that means the safety is on. But again, it's a little bit different. So, for example, on real Berettas and on most of the gas blowback copies and some of the blank ones, the safety is back here, which is a selector switch on this one because it's a semi-auto. But on things like the Eccles Jackal blank gun, the selector switch is actually here, which would be the takedown lever on the real one. So it's a little bit tricky to know sometimes if you don't know the specific prop, so always know your prop. But that would be one of the first things to do is check and make sure the safety is off. Apparently there was one night with Gloria where I don't know who was messing with the prop when or how it happened, but at some point apparently the safety got turned on, so it didn't. The actors didn't know to look for that, so it didn't do anything at all. So that's one quick thing you can check and make sure that your actors know if it doesn't go boom or click or anything like that. If it just doesn't move, that's one thing you can look for is, do I need to Do I need to be able to flick that safety off? And can I? One of the other issues that came up with Gloria, I believe, came down to probably the fact that they were using 2 semi-automatics, and so they had one in the left hand, and the Berettas are really not designed to be ambidextrous. And so I think she was accidentally hitting some of that slide release thing, slide lock with well, indexing this way. So, you know, again, some of that will also factor in. Can you even take the safety off with your left hand if that's an issue? But in general, if you do trust your actor to try messing with it, and as an actor, I've been in scenes where things have misfired. Kind of the standard is the what they call the tap rack boom. So the first thing would be to make sure the magazine is fully seated. Just kind of jam it in there, right? And then rack would be racking the slide, and then try again and see if it goes boom that time. That's kind of our standard military, you know, oh, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. Just try that and go again. It's locking back, it's out of ammo. With the blank guns, chances are good it's the ammunition if it just goes click and not boom at all. Or if it's stovepipes, you'll be able to see it. So the first thing is just to look, and if you see a blank round sticking out, clear that. If it's a stovepipe, it's going to be the round that just went off. So this is usually on your second or third shot. It's a failure to eject. There's a spent 9mm round. So if you see something like that, you'll see it sticking up if you actually look at it. And it's not going to be able to fire the next round that way. So if you are comfortable doing this as an actor, you can clear that round, right? Rack it again, because chances are good that whatever it was didn't chamber it. Now that may mean that if it did have a decent round up there, you might actually eject a good round. So that's one reason, one argument for keeping one extra live round in there, just in case you need to be able to rack it an extra time to make sure. That might cycle through and eject a good round as well, you never know. And then you can try to fire again. If it's a stovepipe, you don't need to worry about tapping the magazine because it's already been feeding fine from the magazine. If it's your first round, it may mean maybe they forgot to chamber a round, or your gun wrangler didn't, or there's a miscommunication there on whether or not you had to. And sometimes if the magazine is not in all the way, it's not going to feed a round. And so if it's your first round, then yeah, that tap, rack, boom can still be sort of your protocol if you're comfortable with it. Some of the jams though, occasionally you'll have a stovepipe type thing or a double feed kind of thing where like there is already one in the chamber, maybe it's your spent round that's in the chamber, and then there's another one that's trying to load and it's jammed up into it. I have run into that occasionally with these blank guns. So you have one that is still in the chamber and a second one that's trying to feed into the chamber, but the first one didn't eject. In that case, if you try and just keep cycling, it's just going to keep stripping more rounds and it's just going to get more of a traffic jam up there by the chamber. So what you have to do first to be able to clear those is eject the magazine. So again, this can be a little complicated for an actor who's not used to handling this stuff, especially under pressure on the fly. For me, the time I was in a scene where that happened, I took a knee. Partly because that gave me a justification for why I didn't get shot while I was sitting there messing with it, because people were supposed to be shooting back at me. This was live theater, not on camera, so I didn't have to worry about dropping out of frame. Some of the stuff will change depending. But I didn't want to just drop the magazine, and I wanted to be able to get at it, but I knew I needed it out of the prop. So for me, what I did at that time was drop the magazine down, set it down on the ground while taking a knee. And then, once the magazine was out, then I was able to rack the slide a few times to clear it, put the magazine back in. There we go, put the magazine back in, rack it again, and then come back up. And all told, it probably only took me about 3 seconds or something, which is a long time in a gunfight, which is part of why I had to duck down and justify why I didn't get shot in the meantime. But the people who saw it was like, oh, that was good handling. Did you plan that ahead of time? No, it's just something that takes a little bit of practice to be able to get those back in fairly quickly and be able to get that action. So this is one of those things that just takes some practice to be able to index and rack without necessarily having to look at what you're doing. And if it's about clearing something, you're probably going to want to do it a couple of times just to make sure, because sometimes it doesn't catch it the first time. So if there is some kind of a jam or a double feed or whatever, eject the magazine first, rack it a couple of times to clear it, put the magazine back in, rack it again, and then go. But, like I said, not every actor can be trusted with that much action, or you want to, right? So for live theater, it might be good to have a second backup plan for something like that. Also, if it is a hang fire, I will warn you, I mean, in modern military training and tactical training, if you have people who've used real firearms before, a lot of them like to rack the slide coming over the top like this, but that puts your hand kind of over the vent, especially if it's a top vent. This is kind of a dangerous position for a blank gun. And if you're trying to strip a stovepipe, that's kind of the easiest way to do is to come over the top this way. But if there's a hang fire, that puts it right in your hand. And actually, Rich Fike, stunt coordinator around here that I've been training with a little bit and hope to work with at some point, actually got an injury when he had something like that happen. He had a hang fire, he went to clear it, and it went off in his hand while his hand was over it. Damaged his hand. So unless you have to clear something that is visibly sticking up, in general, I prefer this, what we call the slingshot grip here, rather than coming over the top that puts my hand where things would actually go off. I like to be back here. And the other advantage is that lets you kind of see into the chamber a little bit as you clear it. So you can see if there's something going on, as opposed to here, where my hand is in the way both of any round going off and also of me being able to see what's happening on the inside there. So, some options for clearing common jams with a semi-automatic. Now, one possibility, let's say you're using a gas blowback, maybe just the magazine's out of gas. So, if appropriate to the show and to the character and to the budget, one possibility is just to carry an extra magazine, because sometimes if something goes wrong, there's a decent chance with these gas blowbacks that the magazine's what's going to die first. So it's not a bad idea to have a second on hand anyway. And if you do have a second on hand anyway, it might be appropriate for the character, especially if they have a police belt or a military tack vest or something anyway, to put that second one on your character with it loaded, so that if you do need it, you can also eject that magazine and try a different magazine and see if that one works, because it might just be that the first magazine somehow was leaking, and by the time you actually needed it for the show, it just wasn't working anymore. So that's one possibility. This is all assuming that you have to keep going, though, which is true in live theater, and it's true in any kind of large battle scene or film. If you're doing a close-up of just that character on film, or a pickup shot or something, though, the other thing that you have to discuss is, do you keep going in character, or do you just say, hold, gun wrangler, armor, I just had a misfire, can you clear this? That is perfectly legitimate as long as it's not going to screw up a bunch of other things. So if it's not a part of a larger shot, you may want to just tell them, if something goes wrong, keep it pointed in a safe direction and ask for help. I'll come fix it. And then you can stop, take a breath, clear whatever the jam is, count to 30, make sure there isn't a hang fire, all that good stuff. But if you're in the middle of a big shootout scene, I mean, the film that I earned my SAG card on, which has never come out, probably never will because lots of reasons, there was a battle scene where you had a bunch of people with matchlocks. Now, matchlocks are going to misfire and hang fire and stuff anyway because it was not the most reliable technology. And, this was a day when we had like 200 extras and stunt people and crew members riding around. We had fog machines going. We had people in armor. We had horses riding in the background. This was a swashbuckler set in the 1700s. And they handed one of the matchlocks, a beautiful matchlock that I think probably was provided by one of the reenactors, to a background player who really didn't have any experience with this stuff. And he ran up in front of the line, in front of everybody else, and he activates it, and the match drops down, and it doesn't work. Which, again, would make sense in character. I'm sure this happened in the period all the time. But with all of the cameras rolling and all this stuff going, he just kind of stops, right, and completely ruins the shot. Completely out of character. So if it's something like that, and there's a lot of events going on, maybe there's effects going off, there's flash pots going off, and there's stuff flying, you don't want to ruin that take just over this one shot not going off, because that doesn't change the story. It's not essential to the plot. So that's where you might have the conversation when you've got a bunch of people involved in a larger scene like that. If you have a misfire, you have a couple of options. If you're comfortable, you can try and clear it or figure it out if you want to. If you're not comfortable, you can give them other options, such as maybe this character had a misfire in which case just move to the back of the line, pretend you're fidgeting with it, and wait till you hear cut. Right? If it's not going to be that long a take. Or if you're not an essential character and you're just background player number 5, if it doesn't work, you drop it in the dirt and pretend to get shot and lie down dead until you hear cut. And then you say, hey, I have a prop here that jammed, someone come fix it, right? Do you pretend like it's going off even if it isn't, because it's a big enough battle scene or they can CG it in later? If it doesn't actually work, you just pretend like it's still going and keep it pointed in a safe direction. And then when it's done, again, stop and say, hey, can I get a hand over here from the armor? I had a misfire, right? Talk about these things ahead of time, because again, somebody ad-libbing on the spot, they could ruin thousands of dollars by ruining the shot. They can ruin the prop by futzing with it when they're not supposed to. They could get themselves or someone else hurt by doing something they're not supposed to. So this is one of the essential questions that an actor has to know when you hand them a prop is, what do I do when it screws up? And chances are good your actor won't think to ask that question. So you, as gun wrangler, as armorer on that shot, as stunt coordinator, whatever your role is, if you're the person handling the firearms and handing them the firearms and telling them what to do, make sure that you have a plan B. Make sure that they know what to do when it doesn't go bang so they don't panic. Give them that security blanket, give them a safety blanket, give them a plan B, just to keep things safe. This is incidentally part of the training through the Society of American Fight Directors. If you do the Theatrical Firearms Safety course with them, there are some things that every actor will need to know when they're handed a prop. How does it work? What is the action? All that stuff. Where is it dangerous? What is its condition? Is it hot? Is it one in the chamber? Is the safety off? All that stuff. And what do I do when it screws up? Because let's face it, blank guns especially, but any of these props, whether it's a gas blowback, a shell ejecting, a piezoelectric non-gun, they all occasionally screw up. It happens. And we've got to plan for that ahead of time. That's what safety is, that's what professionalism is, and that's what'll set you apart as somebody who knows what they're doing in the industry, rather than just someone who's bullshitting this as you go. Cool. Worth taking the time up front. Much better to do that than have a much bigger mess on the back end. So, until next time, I continue to take requests. I'll try and keep up as best I can. It is a little busy right now. But if you have something you want to see, you want to hear about, let me know. You can like, comment, subscribe, ask questions down below. You can also find me on the Facebook page for the Theatrical Firearms Handbook, or over at Fight Designer LLC's page, fightdesigner.com. I am happy to hear from you whenever you want. All right. Till next time, play safe, look good, have fun.